Meta boss decision to get rid of the platform's 40,000 moderators. They had 40,000 people involved with this shit.
Most people watching this are probably quite familiar with the term fact checkers, but just in case you're not, it's a term that implies arbitration of the truth, oftentimes with regards to politics, at least in the United States, and it's a concept that is extremely rife with controversy. On one side, you have a common belief that misinformation is an existential threat to democracy and that those who spread it, or otherwise say things that are incorrect as per the agreed upon narrative at the time, should be completely removed from social media and public.
I don't understand how misinformation can't also be, this is going to be like, guys, I'm really going to display my Fedora power level here. Isn't religion misinformation because it's fucking fake? To say that Noah's Ark or Jonah lived in a fish? So why don't we ban people for talking about religion, or that the earth is 6,000 years old? If you want to start fact checking, let's do that. They found the ark. There is there's undisputable evidence that there was a huge flood. There is not undisputable evidence that it was caused by God because he was mad and Noah put every animal on there and it covered the entire earth and it wiped everybody else out. That's there's a bit of a difference there, isn't there, right? And so it's like, how is it that like these fact checkers are only focusing on that and not this other stuff?
Discourse. On the other, you have advocates of free speech who believe that suppression of that right is a far worse offense than any misinformation could ever possibly be, while rigidly asserting that whether or not something is true or goes against public perception or even offends the sensibilities of their fellow citizens is entirely irrelevant, because the right of the speaker to say it transcends any potential right for the government, businesses, or social media platforms to stop them. For the past few years, it almost felt like background noise, at least in my view. It was certainly happening, fact-checking all over the place, but there wasn't really anything we could do to change it. Private social media companies are going to do whatever it is they want to do. And maybe long-term impacts like governmental regulation over a multi-year period resulting from certain elected officials might have some sort of impact. But boots on the ground...
I wouldn't be surprised if fact-checking, if the companies are putting out official statements on certain things being true or not, I wouldn't be surprised if some companies might be worried that certain outcomes that were arrived at by fact checkers could make the company liable in case a person acted on that in a way that was detrimental. I think there's also a good chance that that could happen, that there's like some sort of abstract liability that this creates. But I don't know. That's just a guess.
Normal, everyday people had very little effect on the overall concept of fact checkers.
Yeah.
Without getting too far into the weeds, fact checking was particularly prevalent during the rise of COVID-19 and is also extremely common when it comes to political discourse. A couple of high profile examples would be when fact checkers adamantly labeled, or shut down rather, discussion of the Wuhan lab leak theory for COVID-19, the origins of it, or the Hunter Biden laptop story, which took hold at the climax of the 2020 presidential race. You might actually see down below this video right now some kind of stupid little blue banner.
They should make Hunter Biden the main character of GTA 6. They should have a mod for that. Maybe Nexus mods will allow that since he's not running for office, where they replace that girl with Hunter Biden.
Link to like Wikipedia or something, because I said COVID and Hunter Biden laptop, and YouTube is making sure you know the truth.
That'd be a good idea.
Boilerplate, here are the facts kind of statement about whatever issue it perceives me to be talking about. I had that happen recently with a story about leaked files on a hacking forum because I mentioned Area 51 with this dumbass definition of what Area 51 really is down below, even though it had basically nothing to do with the actual video, and there was nothing even remotely untrue that I said in its entirety. But regardless, fact checkers over the past 8 or so years, it feels like, became a pretty ubiquitous concept online. That is, they were until now. It's a bit of an unexpected...
I think the problem is that some of the facts that they were checking were not accurate. And that's what happened, is that people feel like fact-checking is biased, and it's also not... The issue is that I think that... And it's like a cultural thing, right? Where like you have things like 1984 and like other books that create... like basically different ideas or metaphors of like a ministry of truth. And I think that it's something that just culturally people are very afraid of because of how much like social, like, or how much media we've had and how much like discussion we've had about that happening in the past. Arbiters of truth. Yeah, exactly.
news break, in my view,
Who
but
decides
recently
what's misinformation?
Facebook, now called
exactly.
Meta, is apparently distancing themselves from the idea of fact-checkers immediately before the incoming Trump administration takes power, which has led to a very interesting divide in public opinion about whether or not that's a good thing. As I said earlier, one side says yes, the other says no, but I want to take a deeper look at the announcement, what it means, and who it impacts, because in my view, it's a very clear turning of the tide, if you will, and I wouldn't be surprised if we look back on this 5 or 10 years from now as an inflection point in the world of online discourse.
Yeah, it's
My premise is very simple. Fact-checking, in its basic rudimentary form, is absolutely good and extremely necessary. However, fact-checking as we see it on social media here and now, today, is a complete joke, governed and manipulated by people who are deliberately bastardizing the concept as a result of their own intrinsic bias.
He's right. And the truth is that fact-checking 2.0 is community notes. Like, fact-checking is a fundamentally good idea, but the problem is that when it's done by a source with no with absolute authority and no accountability. And I feel like community notes is like, it's basically the patch that makes fact-checking more fair. It's a balance patch.
You can't strip the system
community
down
notes
to a much
really
more neutral
bad. I don't think
baseline.
it is.
It really just shouldn't exist. Here's the announcement from Zuckerberg. He did a 5-minute video talking about what type of changes will be made.
Yeah, I don't
and
think so.
And it's also widely reported in the news cycle. But the gist of it is that they're dialing back their content moderation algorithms, reintroducing more civic content to the algorithm. That's probably going to suck. I can already feel it. Eliminating their use of fact checkers in favor of a community-sourced alternative, similar to what Twitter is doing under Elon Musk, and a few more things that I honestly don't really care about because I don't use Facebook. The important thing here, obviously, is the removal of fact checkers, which hopefully signals a wider shift in the social media space. But let me explain precisely why
I think that there's also another covert problem that fact checkers create, especially as things like gender become a bigger part of the discourse and different types of especially like with immigrant groups like committing crime, etc. Is that in a lot of cases, like if you look at biological realities, it's very clear that men on average are stronger and, have certain physical advantages over women. So it puts, because like fact checking absolutely seemed to be something that was put in place to counterbalance what was effectively a bunch of fake news and lies put out by Donald Trump, right? Because, and Trump did lie about a lot of stuff. I mean, let's be fair here. He did. But the truth is that when you create it as kind of a counterbalance for that, and then the tool then becomes getting used as like saying like, oh yeah, well, these things are actually like factually true. Well, then it becomes a huge issue about what? Well, like as an example, like they're eating the cats and dogs thing. This is completely unsubstantiated and there was no evidence for it ever provided. It was totally fucking bullshit. And this is a new example, right? It's not even an old one from back in the day. It's a completely new example, complete bullshit. He should have never said it. It made him look stupid. And this is coming from somebody like, you guys know I'm not like one of these like blind Trump haters, right? But like, you've got to be able to call him as you see him, right? I mean, come on, that's it. Well, it's the first one that comes to the top of my mind, right? I mean, I could probably think of more if I thought and sat there, but like I'm discussing all of this extemporaneously, right? So I don't have like a list of 50 right now, but my point is that was the idea of fact checking. But the issue also is that as fact checking gets involved in things that the facts are inconvenient for the people that wanted fact checking then becomes bad. And do you guys see kind of how it begins to cannibalize itself? Because I actually think that like basically, like this is I think that both sides are anti-science. One side is anti-science with biology, with like the like female to male or male to female trends, like like athletes, for example, right? Which is like a super minor issue, but it is anti-science. And I think that the right wing is anti-science with things like climate change. I think that they both are. But like the fact is that like the way that fact checking is done is it seems like it's one dimensional. Does that think it's a minor issue? Yeah, of course.
That way, because again, the basic premise of fact checking is completely necessary in a modern digital world. Okay. I'll start with this. Facebook uses a well-documented approach to fact-checking, which relies on an organization called IFCN, which is the International Fact-Checking Network. That system, however, was only implemented in 2020. Prior to that, Facebook used more direct partners, such as Snopes.com.
No, this entire thing was done as a response to not only Donald Trump, but also to COVID. I think any reasonable person would know that the rise of fact-checking was because of these two reasons. Even if you agree with it, that's why it happened.
For a multi-year period, ending in 2019. Interestingly, Snopes.com is actually one of the signatories for the IFCN, which means that Facebook is actually still working with them to a degree. It's just not a direct link between the two companies.
Okay.
Considering its direct partnership from 2016 to 2019 and its current approved status with the International Fact-Checking Network, Snopes is the example I chose to focus on for today while discussing the concept of fact-checking. Facebook is obviously doing this because it perceives fact-checking to be detrimental to its business. By itself, that means nothing. But one of the reasons directly cited by Mark Zuckerberg is political bias and loss of trust. Well, in order for Snopes to be approved by the IFCN, it has to go through an evaluation process, which has happened 4 separate times in the past 8 or so years. Twice during the time it was directly partnered with Facebook. Bear with me here. One of the criteria in that process reads, quote, "Non-partisanship policy evidence required. Please share evidence of your policy preventing staff from direct involvement in political parties and advocacy organizations," end quote. And this is very obviously on its face a good rule to have.
Sure.
Because when fact-checking on social media is so inextricably linked to politics every single day, you really can't have people arbitrating the truth that are donating to or directly affiliated with one side of the political spectrum.
Well, I think that this problem too was like also, and like if you want to use this as an example, let me see if I can find an indicator for this. So let me see. I mean, there's a lot of charts that basically demonstrate the same thing. But if you look at political contributions, the majority of political contributions done by tech companies are to Democrat politicians and to Democrat policies. And you can just look this up if you want. And so I think that like the extrapolation of trust also goes to the companies as well. And I think that also, like, this is separate than what is or what isn't. This is a perception of what is and what isn't. It benefits them the most. Sure, right? I'm not getting into that. But what my opinion is that if you're of that other group and you see that this company that is donating, let's say 90% of their money to like one political party happens to keep fact checking your political party that they're not donating to, you're going to think that it's a scam. And if enough people think that something's a scam, it becomes a scam. That's just the way it is. And so, and it's a problem is that truth isn't a democracy, but in a lot of times it functions like one. And I think this is an example of that.
Bias. And even if that writer or the employer thinks that they're capable of being unbiased, they're not. Here's the problem. If you look at the actual assessment that was done here in 2018, which was during their partnership with Facebook, you can see the responses that were given by the person applying, or rather organization applying. And the response that Snopes gave reads, quote, "See the statements at the head of the staff page and the revenue page," end quote. That's it. Well, deciding to go down the rabbit hole, because why not go down the rabbit hole, I went and looked at the staff page, where way down at the bottom, there's a note that says, quote, "Members of our editorial staff are precluded from donating to or participating in political campaigns, political party activities, or political advocacy organizations," end quote. That sounds fine, right? But something told me to start checking, so I picked a name and I checked. I picked Jordan Lyles, who is a senior reporter, obviously part of the editorial staff, working at Snopes for the past 8 years in various different positions. And I looked up political campaign contributions, which turned up this right here, showing a bunch of donations by people named Jordan Lyles to various committees and politicians. That's no big deal, but small problem. 5 of those donations in 2018 come from someone named Jordan Lyles, who was employed at the time by a company called Bardav. And this is where I went way far down the rabbit hole because Bardav was apparently a joint company created by Barbara and David Mickelson, founders of Snopes, where each of them owned a 50% share. It's the parent organization of Snopes.com. And connecting the dots now, Jordan Lyles, while working for Snopes at the level of video producer, was donating actively to Act Blue, which is a Democratic super PAC. And that was the first name I chose. From here, it got even...
To be fair, it does seem like this guy is a bit different because he donated a lot of money to Trump, too. And if you look at this here, he donated $500. Act Blue only got a few bucks, but Trump got a lot. Trump was actually coming out ahead with this. You think it's a different guy? Oh, no. You're absolutely right. I'm sorry. You're 100% right. Because this is in another state. Yeah, this is in NC. Like North Carolina, maybe? I don't know. And so, yeah, totally different employer. My bad. I've never seen this chart before. It's my first time looking at it.
Blue, which is a Democratic super PAC.
Yeah.
And that was the first name I chose. From here, it got even worse. It kind of spiraled out of control because Bardav, the company, was subjected to a battle for ownership rights around 2016 because the wife, Barbara Mickelson, sold her shares to a company called Proper Media. I'm not going to get too bogged down right now, but that sale and the situations afterward eventually led to a lawsuit which contained allegations by Barbara Mickelson that her husband, Snopes founder David Mickelson, had been embezzling money, defrauding the company, and spending the money on prostitutes. But wait, there's more, because not...
Of course.
Not only did David Mickelson divorce her, he also married another Snopes employee, a staffer named Alyssa Young, who, according to a Daily Mail investigation, maintained a website advertising her services as an escort while she was working at Snopes.
Oh, God. Yeah. Man.
These are the people fact-checking
you. Know, this never happens, guys. This is the first time this has ever happened.
I'm still not done, because later down the line, in 2021, I shit you not, it comes out that David Mickelson, who still had his ownership stake in Snopes, served as an officer and apparently also worked for them in an editorial capacity,
of course,
was suspended because he wrote dozens of plagiarized articles between 2015 and 2019 under an alias, and these are the people that are fact-checking you.
Wait, what? So, oh my... There's like, this is so stupid. How is this so fucking dumb? Now we know why Snopes is such an expert on paying adult film stars for fact-checking. Yeah, this is how they knew all this stuff about Stormy Daniels? That's a good point. Yeah.
Still not even remotely done, because if that was the domino chain I found after randomly picking a single name off of their staff list, what was I going to find next? Let's find out. The next name I picked, trying to spread out across various different positions, was the Chief Revenue Officer, Justin Wohl. One person shows up in the political donation archives who simultaneously gave money to Act Blue as well as the Biden campaign, but the employer of this person is Salon. I thought to myself, well, that can't be him.
Yeah.
But that little voice came back in my head because this person working at Salon, was also a chief revenue officer. What are the chances of that happening? So I checked the LinkedIn page, and wait a second, Justin Wohl, according to his employment history on his own social media, simultaneously worked as the chief revenue officer at Snopes and Salon in 2020, which is...
Damn, bro, dual spec? That's crazy. This guy's putting in work.
When the donations were made.
All right.
2 for 2. And this time, at least he chose a company other than Bardav to put on the public record for his political campaign contributions.
So basically, the entire premise of them being forbidden to donate is just a simply untrue reality because they've donated money to political campaigns and it's observable in public campaign finance data sheets. Okay, so literally, like, the entire premise of their unbiased nature is just a lie. Okay, well, I think that pretty much settles it. What are we even talking about?
I mean, that's a choice. You're employed by these two different companies.
Everyone is biased. The rule was stupid? No. To say that the rule was stupid and that everybody is biased, how many, like, dude, what do you think the odds are that every single one of these people that they're finding is all donating to the same party? They all have the same accused political lean. The hidden information that's discovered only reflects what the expectation was. Like, how many points on the graph do you need to draw a line? I feel like you're being dishonest here, aren't you? Unless there's legal consequence, why the fuck do they have the rule in the first place? It's not about whether the rule is legally binding or not. It's about the fact that they have the rule. The rule is there to increase their credibility. The rule is they have that rule to make themselves look more credible. So when you say, we made a rule so we look like we're unbiased, and then you're doing something that's biased, well then, good question, why do they have the rule? It's because they were lying.
Supposed to put Salon. But anyway, we have 2 employees at Snopes, right? Mid and high levels, actively donating to a political campaign during an election cycle, while the website that they are employed by and help to operate is fact-checking at what seems to be like a very disproportionate ratio, in my view. After that, I bounced between names for kind of a while, either finding nothing or being unable to directly prove that the person from the same state with the same name who said unemployed on their donations was actually the same employee working for Snopes, though it's very possible that some of them were. But then I found Anna. I have no idea how to pronounce the last name.
Can you explain why someone with political preference cannot verify or check sources of some information? I don't think that there's a problem with them having a bias. The problem is that they state that they don't. So if they came out and they said, we are an agenda group, we want to correct information to push this agenda, and we want to replace it with the information that we think is correct, then I feel like people might disagree with the goal, but it would be honest and it would be direct. What people don't like here is the lie. People are not really that concerned, I think, with the fact that they're doing this. I think everybody expected this. But to find out that it's true and that the lie actually is real, that's a big difference. You see what I'm saying? So the fact checkers no more in the future? Yeah, I think people aren't going to take it seriously anymore. And so, like, that's the reason why people are mad. They're not mad because this happened. They're mad because they were continuously lied to, gaslighted, and everybody was trying to convince them on at least, like, you know, these like authoritative sources were trying to convince them, no, we're telling the truth. Like, look at all of these ways that we make sure that we ensure that we're not doing something wrong. Then it's discovered that they are. Wow, people are mad. Because it's an insult to everybody. And this, it's kind of what I said before about like hypocrisy and why hypocrisy is so, it is such an aggro thing on the internet. The reason why hypocrisy is such a massive aggro problem on the internet is because it is a direct insult at the person who is the observer or the viewer. They're saying that you are so stupid that we can lie to your face and you won't know it. And that's why people are really mad. Because it personally insults the intelligence of every single person who is observing this happening, and then to tell them that the emperor isn't wearing new clothes, or sorry, the emperor has new clothes. That's the reason why. That is what's happening. That's the problem. And I understand that some people might disagree with this. You might think that it's good. That's fine. But I'm identifying what's happening.
But this is Anna, who is a straight-up reporter for Snopes, as in the people writing the fact checks. Well, Anna comes up with a lot of small donations to Act Blue in 2020 with an employer listed as Annual Reviews.
Wow.
Which, it turns out, is in fact the company that she worked for in 2020, according to her LinkedIn profile. which made...
And don't you find it to be interesting that they're donating, and you find it to be interesting that they're all donating under different companies than the company that they're part of, which is Snopes? So, like, none of them are donating under the Snopes company because they're actively trying to hide this connection? Like, I mean, you've got 3 people doing the same thing because they know that it's wrong. Lock them up? No, this isn't. They're not committing crimes. They're just being assholes.
Separate instances where Snopes employees, including those on the editorial team, were either actively donating to a Democratic super PAC during their employment or donated directly prior to their employment in that position. Remember, as per the IFCN criteria, Snopes was asked for evidence of their policy preventing direct involvement in political parties. It doesn't specify who or how or when. It just says involvement. And sure, you could technically make an argument that donations directly prior to your involvement at a fact-checking website for one political party don't compromise you or violate the policy, or that donations that were made when you were a video producer or a C-suite executive at the company don't matter because you weren't technically on the editorial team per se. But after going down the rabbit hole on their founder, who was simultaneously serving on the editorial staff, plagiarizing articles for 5 years, and allegedly stealing money to buy hookers and marry an escort who was also employed.
I mean, like, was he embezzling money to buy hookers? Well, he married a hooker. What do you think? If you had to flip a coin. What's wrong with hookers? Nothing. Don't have a single problem with hookers. You want to pay for hookers? Go ahead. I mean, it's a bit... It is a... I would say that it is an indicator of a lack of moral fiber when you're paying for hookers and you're married. I would say that's not... What would Jesus do? Would Jonathan Joestar do that? Would Himmel the Hero do that? Would Captain America do that? No. Would the president do that? Well, that's, I mean, come on.
By the company?
Hey.
I don't know. I think I'm fresh out of charitability here as to this company's credibility and their supposed effort to be the unbiased jury of truth. As I went about making this video, specifically the part about the founder, I read a really good quote from a writer at Forbes named Kalev Litaru, I think is how you say it. Here it is. Quote, "While technology pundits decry the black boxes of the algorithms that increasingly power companies like Facebook, they've forgotten that even the human-powered sites offer us little visibility into how they function.
I wonder why.
At the end of the day, it is clear that before we rush to place fact-checking organizations like Snopes in charge of arbitrating what is truth on Facebook, we need to have a lot more understanding of how they function internally and much greater transparency into their work." End quote.
Based.
I like
Absolutely.
that a lot. Because
He's
after
right.
Facebook has now disbanded its fact-checking initiatives, a lot of people are crying and crying about how misinformation is going to be a huge problem. Spoiler, it already is a huge problem.
Yeah, how do you say this when there's like a video, like every other Facebook group, it seems, that I hear about is like it's half Jesus and he's also a horse. And it says, "Look who came to my barn today." And it's a bunch of 70-year-old women saying amen or like quoting their favorite Bible verse in the comments. Like, I'm sorry, but like, if you can't even figure out Centaur Jesus, then I don't want to hear about what somebody's take on COVID is. Really? No, I'm. It's outrageous.
And companies like Snopes do not help with that. Mark Zuckerberg made very particular statements about bias and loss of credibility, which we need to understand comes after a multi-year partnership directly with Snopes, and then after a partnership with the IFCN, which verified Snopes as a trusted signatory on 4 separate occasions, despite the abundantly obvious political contributions that people all over their company have made and continue to.
Well, they weren't obvious. They donated under a separate company in order to avoid that detection. They deliberately obfuscated the donations in order to make themselves seem unbiased. That's what they did. It's obvious. Like, I mean, you'd have to be totally intellectually dishonest to not be able to draw a line from this. Isn't that fraud? No, it's not fraud. There's no fraud involved here. I don't think that there's any laws that are being broken. It's just bad behavior. They donated to both parties. What the fuck are we even talking about? No, see, Valeriax, that's what I thought too. But whenever I looked at the chart, I actually saw that multiple people of the same name came up, and you could distinguish which person it was by looking at the state that they were in. So I thought the same thing originally because it was confusing to me too, but that's not what it was. The different listings of different political parties and employers was actually because of the fact that they were different people with the same name.
I find it completely impossible to sit here and do anything other than flat out agree with Zuckerberg. Bias is a problem. Snopes, in my opinion, is very clearly biased.
Yeah.
And I don't really expect to find anything different if I switch over to another fact-checking
organization. In terms of, like, if we have another scandal about a politician buying hookers, I will go to Snopes first to find out what really happened.
Because the people that position themselves to do this for the past decade or two have repeatedly proven who they are. My final take on the situation is that fact-checking as an underlying premise is completely necessary and extremely valuable. Having the ability to look at something objectively and discern truth is a skill set that everyone should have. But in place of that, if they don't, because not everyone does or even cares to, some sort of unbiased third-party verification would be, in theory, amazing. Sadly, that's not what we have. Instead, we have a particular group of people who sought power for a particular purpose and continuously allow their own bias to infect the work.
There's no way that you can have an unbiased fact-checking system. So the best way that you can do it is to have a biased fact-checking system that has the highest degree of accountability and consensus possible. That's the next best thing.
They do, which led to a complete erosion of trust in basically their entire institution, which is now seeing significant steps towards abolishment. In an article from Wired, we see, quote, one editor at a US-based fact-checking organization that works with Meta's, who was not authorized to speak on the record, told Wired that Meta's decision is going to eventually drain us out.
That's what people were hoping.
Further down, stated by the director of the IFCN, which Facebook most recently worked with, quote, fact-checkers have not been biased in their work. That attack line comes from those who feel they should be able to exaggerate and lie without rebuttal or contradiction. End quote.
The problem is that, and this is the biggest issue that a lot of people understand. So there are a lot of kinds of lies, right? So there's a, I don't know, what's the magic number? And if the magic number is 5 and they guess 5, you tell them it's not. Like a literal objective fact lie. There's a lie by exaggeration. So, like, for example, somebody drives through a crowd of people and, it's like, he killed 3 people and, not injured, 150 or something like that, right? So there's there's exaggerations, which is also a form of lying. And then there's also lying by omission. So, that's like saying, oh, well, police shoot man running away from the scene. But then the man also had shot somebody else or shot at the police. And, he threw his gun away as he was running away. And so all these different types of things are done with the same goal. And the goal is specifically to mislead the person into believing something that isn't true. And so in all cases, the goal is malicious and it's meant to damage the person's view on reality. It doesn't matter what it is.
But that statement from the director is
misleading.
False.
Yeah. All of them, yes, people really, that's why truth is important. Yeah, and there's also other lies too that I'm just not thinking of. Like, for example, there's a contentious topic and you only bring on one side to talk about it. It's like, oh yeah, okay, sure, right? And that's why, for example, with the NARC and Ashes of Creation thing, I brought on NARC, then I brought on Steven, right? And then people can make their decision and decide for themselves what they believe. And so that's the, I think, smart thing to do. And like making sure that like you give a degree of like, I would say, what's the word for it? Like like parity to things. Yeah, used to push agendas. Yeah, exactly.
Because even the IFCN, at least according to what I see, is failing objectively to properly vet their partners and contributing to an atmosphere where the value of fact-checking is now widely and rightly disputed. As it stands, the industry of fact-checking has sustained a tremendous blow to its reach.
I think that you can't have a ministry of truth with fact-checking because it's too much of a magnet for people that are trying to push agendas. Anybody who's trying to push agendas is going to try to, like, that's the main place that you're going to try to go. Like, if that was me, that's what I would do. So the best way to deal with this is to just completely avoid the situation entirely. Just don't have a ministry of truth. Don't have a fact-checking organization. Let it be a consensus by the public that is agreed upon through, discussion, debate, and consensus. That's what I would say.
Forms includes Facebook, Instagram, and Threads, which is a clear shift in the atmosphere of who gets to speak and who gets to speak about what. I have no idea if the end result of this new direction is a good thing. No one really does yet, but it's certainly not unexpected. I mean, the announcement was unexpected, but the loss of faith in the institution of fact-checking is not unexpected at all, given how it's gone for the past few years. But yeah, it kind of feels natural considering how obviously the fact-checkers have abused their positions in so many different controversial moments. That's it. The video title says "The Death of Fact-Checkers," which I believe maybe...
It is done. Like, after this, the credibility of fact-checking is completely destroyed. Totally destroyed. People are never going to trust them again. At least not in any sort of like a recent time.
True from an institutional perspective, and I'm not really sad about it.
Yeah.
Community sourced moderation is a really good thing to try, so let's try it. I hope it works. Of course, they do need to moderate illegal content and other severe infractions, obviously. Of course. But run-of-the-mill theories, speculation, and opinions, especially ones that diverge from the common collective, yeah, we don't need people like Snopes over here to fact-check that. If you want to support the channel, check out the links down below, a special VPN deal, locals and Patreon, channel memberships. I'm trying to branch away from ad revenue, so check those if you want to. And more, but I'll cut it there and stop rambling.
Definitely
as always,
a good idea.
Thank you all for watching. Question everything, and have a nice night.
Yeah. Totally fucking agree. I think fact-checking is going to completely fall off, and I think that it already is falling off, to be honest. I think it's going to just keep getting worse, and people are going to keep taking it less seriously and not believing it for a lot of different reasons. It's not like there's one reason. It's like 10 different reasons. And ultimately, the best way to do fact-checking, like community notes, in my opinion, is a better version of fact-checking. Like, I'm not saying that, like, it's perfect, right? It's definitely not perfect, but it is absolutely a better version of it. And I think that that's pretty much what's going to happen more.